Hello, hello. I am Rebecca Van Buren. I am a licensed real estate broker here in the great state of Texas. And today it is my pleasure to be here with my friend, my attorney, Samuel Reid, and we are going to be discussing the seller title policy. So stay tuned. Okay, Sam, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Can you just tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I've been practicing law in Granbury for 6 years now. I focus on probate, estate planning, and all things real estate. I work with a number of HOAs. Of course, I work very closely with Stonewall Title Company and, do a lot of curative work and things like that for them. We also work with developers, not only with the city of Granbury, but sometimes with other cities doing, zoning, platted, things of that nature.
Okay, so my connection to Sam as it relates to this topic is Stonewall Title Company. They are my absolute favorite title company here in Hood County to work with because you never know when something's going to come up, and they have an attorney that is right down the hall that can usually help us with stuff. So today we're going to be discussing the seller title policy. First of all, Sam, what on earth is a title policy and who needs one?
Great question. So a title policy is what the title company ultimately issues. And what it is it's an insurance policy like any other piece of insurance. It's a little bit different than regular insurance because we're not insuring against something that might happen in a sense. We're ensuring that the title is clear that you're receiving. So really it's a look at the past history of the property, providing insurance in that way. Who needs one? Everyone really needs one, I think, but especially if it's, acreage, family land, things like that, things that, may not have followed, all the exact proper procedures of the law or been kept up over the years. You need a title policy because what it's going to do is the title company is going to research the title and they're going to tell you, hopefully the title is clear, or if not, what you need to do to get it clear. And then they're going to give you an insurance policy. And that insurance policy says if for some reason someone ever shows up and claims an interest in the property, one, they're going to pay to defend it as long as it's within the terms. And two, if you ultimately lose that, they're going to reimburse you up to the amount of the policy for your loss there. And so it not only does it check the title, but it makes sure that you feel secure going forward if anyone ever showed up to challenge that title.
And you guys go all the way back to the sovereignty of the land, right?
Yep.
So you're going to follow back and make sure that there is absolutely nothing that isn't addressed.
That's our goal.
I would never buy a piece of property without getting a title policy. I just think that's so important.
It's so much money to spend, and for your average person who's not a builder or an investor in real estate, that's one of the biggest purchases you're going to make is purchasing your home.
Absolutely.
And so there's no reason not to insure that and make sure that you're not going to lose all that money you spend on it.
Well, when we get the title commitment, I think that oftentimes it's completely overwhelming for people. And they're not used to looking at it. For you and I, we look at them every day. But tell us a little bit about what the parts are of the title commitment and what it means.
Sure, yeah. Just, we're saying title policy, title commitment. The title policy is what you ultimately get from the title company. But before that, they issue the title commitment, right? And so the title commitment is going to break down kind of the terms of what the title company is committing to insure, which ultimately turns into the policy. And so there's 4 schedules on the commitment. We call it, there's schedule A, B, C, and D. We call it, the ABCs of the title commitment because you can pretty much ignore Schedule D to start off with. So that's a whole, sheet or two you just get to take off. Schedule D just says who owns the title company and who's receiving premium from the process of closing. And so you can really ignore that. Starting with Schedule A, Schedule A is the facts. We say, it's the actual facts. And so what it shows who owns the property. It shows who's wanting to buy the property. It shows who the lender is. There's a lender. It shows the purchase price. It shows the loan amount. That's the first place to look. And so you want to make sure that the person you're buying from is the person listed as the record owner of the land. If they're not, then there's going to be an issue, right? It doesn't mean the transaction's dead, but it means there's an issue that needs to be figured out.
And I will jump in here and say, when Sam says you should look at it, hopefully you are working with a professional real estate agent that is looking at it on your behalf. But oftentimes I think a lot of real estate agents don't understand the title policy. They don't know what they're looking for and they don't read it. Is that accurate?
Just like Yes, it is. A lot of times realtors end up not looking at the title policy, but there are a lot of really good realtors out there too when they do. And I know Rebecca always looks at the title commitment.
I love to read title commitments, but it is important that you look at it as well as a buyer so that you can inspect what you expect.
Exactly. Very well said, Rebecca.
Yep.
Schedule A, like I said, super simple. It's just the facts. So let's move on to Schedule B. Schedule B is what is accepted from your coverage. It is what the title company is not going to cover with your title policy. And there's a laundry list of items there, but I'm going to go over just a couple real quick. So the first one is all of the restrictive covenants that apply to your land. When you receive the title commitment, you will also receive copies of the restrictive covenants, if there are any, that apply to your land. I would always look at your restrictive covenants because they could be extra restrictions on what you could use the land for. And specifically, if you're not just buying it for your home, but you're buying the land for a specific purpose, let's say you wanted to raise cattle or horses or pigs or something on the land, you need to check those restrictive covenants because they might say that you can't do that activity on your land. So you would know that this isn't the property for you. Additionally, if it is a specific purpose you want to use it for, I would highly recommend you speak with your realtor and have them include that in your earnest money contract. So that way, if you end up looking at these covenants after the title commitment comes out, you can't use the land for that, then you can get out of the contract. And you say, look, the contract said I was going to be able to use the land to raise cattle. The covenants say I'm not allowed to raise cattle. And so, the contract can't be upheld. And so I'm going to walk.
Big one is chickens.
Yeah, a lot of people want to raise
Chickens.
poultry.
People want chickens. It's so interesting how many people want fresh eggs, but how many covenants and restrictions will not allow you to have chickens.
Yeah, I'll say if you have an HOA, the odds are you can't have chickens. So the first sign of if you want to have chickens and you're moving into somewhere with an HOA, you're looking at it, check those covenants because the odds are you can't have chickens in an HOA. The other big issue on the contract, I'll just continue from there, is in the contract, it's section C6 or C8 of the Texas 1-4 family residential contract. There is a provision that says how many days you have to object to the title commitment. What that is for is when you receive the title commitment, under your contract, you have a certain amount of time to, in writing, submit objections to the seller and the title company on, what you don't find acceptable on the contract. From there, the buyer can then either agree to fix those issues or they can say, I'm not going to fix them. And if they say they're not going to fix them, you can walk at that point, or you can say, fine, I'll go ahead and close even though you're not going to fix them.
And by meaning walk, you mean terminate the contract to get your earnest money back.
Thanks.
And because you've paid for this option and you've also got this time frame that he's talking about to be able to do your due diligence.
Correct. Thanks for clarifying that. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is the very correct answer. Yeah, it's terminating the contract and be able to walk away with your money back. A lot of times in that provision, realtors by default seem to put 3 days. That is not a sufficient amount of time. And so I would advise you, when you're working with your realtor on that contract, we recommend at least a minimum of 7 days. We really like to see 10 days there.
10's the buyer. I use 10.
Yeah.
Or I try to use 10.
Yeah, 10 is just so much better because if you think about 3 days, that's not business days. It's just 3 days. So if you got that title commitment on a Friday and then, Saturday happens, Sunday happens, you have to object by Monday. And what if, there's some complex issues that show up on the commitment? You may want an attorney to review that and submit the objections. That's just not enough time.
Yeah.
And if you don't submit them timely, they're waived. And so very important to work with your realtor to make sure you have a sufficient amount of time to object.
Agree.
In that area.
Agree.
Moving on through B, the rest of B, for the most part, just says that, the commitment isn't, or the policy ultimately isn't going to cover mineral interests. We're not going to cover building setback lines. We're not going to cover certain easements, things like that. So it's just the exceptions to the policy.
Some of the special uses, what could those be?
Special uses, like we talked about earlier, could be raising chickens and any sort of livestock or cattle. They could be
the big one that we see.
Yeah, maybe you want to have a mobile home on the property. Some, a lot of HOA neighborhoods have restrictions that you can't have a mobile home on it.
Yeah.
So if you're wanting to buy a lot and move a mobile home onto it, check those restrictions because you may not be allowed on the lot you're looking at.
Absolutely.
That's pretty much an overview on Schedule B. The big one is Schedule C. And Schedule C, we say the C stands for clear to close. On Schedule C...
Oh, the words every agent wants to hear. Clear to close.
Yes. That is where, if there's any issues that come up, where they will appear and they have to be addressed. If they're not addressed, they roll over to Schedule B and get included in the commitment. But I'll tell you from a practical standpoint, if they don't get it addressed, it's probably not closing because a lender's not going to loan the money, and likely the buyer who will want to close with those things on there? And so what do we see on Schedule C? We can see outstanding liens from deeds of trust. So that doesn't necessarily mean there's anything bad. It just means that, the previous owner still has a deed of trust and owes the bank some money on the mortgage. That just means that that's going to get paid off at the closing. Not a big deal.
You know what's something I've seen that oftentimes this is also something that the seller isn't even aware of. I had a case where seller put in a swimming pool. He went sideways with his swimming pool builder and didn't pay the last bill. And so they filed a lien against him. So he wasn't even aware of it. And, that still has to be cured, even if he is disagreeing on what he owes that person. That's my recommendation. I'm not an attorney, but you need to pay it and then deal with it later because it's on Schedule C. It's not going away.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, you're not going to be able to close with it there likely until it's dealt with. And so that can get dealt with the closing proceeds if the parties agree to that, but it has to be cured before or at the time of close. And so we can see material liens like that with the swimming pool.
Yep.
We can see IRS tax liens. Let's hope you don't ever see an IRS tax lien. That can be cured, but IRS is the federal government, and so that takes a lot longer to wade through. But it can be done, and we do it. Mm-hmm. And we can see things like maybe the house was mom and dad's, and the sellers, one of their sons, and selling it, mom and dad passed, and there was never a probate done or a way to transfer that title. We'll see issues on Schedule C that say, hey, we have to have a probate or do an affidavit of heirship or somehow cure the title. That's what we call a hole in the chain of title. There's not a document that connects it from the person that's currently selling it from who owned it previously.
And that's all. I see that often.
Yeah,
that's very common to see. And sometimes the sellers know and sometimes they don't know.
Right.
Especially when it's in an estate or the seller is an heir and they think they have the ability to sell it, and this is when it all comes out.
Absolutely, yeah. And so really that's Schedule C's job. It's where all of our judgments will show up, all of our liens, all of our issues with the chain of title. And so that kind of gives us a roadmap of what needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of promulgated language on Schedule C. And so, a lot of it you don't necessarily have to worry about as much. It talks about documents creating your title or interest must be approved by us, signed, notarized, and filed for record. That's just saying that we have to approve the final documents that convey the property. There's a lot of language in there that's just standard language.
That's what promulgated means. It's just standard language, by the way. That's attorney speak, but promulgated forms and promulgated language. So just so you know what that means.
Yeah, so the title industry is regulated by the Texas Department of Insurance, if you didn't know that. And so our commitments, generally speaking, have promulgated language that we're required to have in there from Texas Department of Insurance. And then there are some exceptions to that and some specific things that come up, like we were talking about with the liens, but a lot of the language is promulgated by the state.
Yeah, and who pays for a title policy? Well, it's negotiable. I would say right now in this current market here in January 2024, typically the seller is paying for the seller's title policy. And the seller's title policy is a percentage of the sales price of the home. And so that can be calculated. Your real estate agent can calculate it, or the title company can calculate it as well and give you an idea of what that is.
Absolutely, and that rate is also set by the state. The title companies have no way to, at least in Texas, cannot in any way set their own rates for that. It's all set by Texas Department of Insurance to the penny.
Yeah, and so what you're paying for is service, which is what we get, fantastic service, or what I get, which is fantastic service in Stonewall.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah. So anything else you want to add?
No, that's about it. That's kind of your basics of the title commitment. So just to recap, A is your actual facts. That's going to be where you see, who owns the property, who's buying it, what the price is, who the lender is, etc. B is going to be those exceptions from the title policy. So it's the things the title company isn't covering, like those deed restrictions. But do read those deed restrictions because that's stuff you can and can't do with your property. And then Schedule C is clear to close. That's the big area to look. As long as you see the right person in title on Schedule A, then Schedule C is the big place to look to see if there's any issues that have to be figured out before closing.
Great information, Sam. Thank you so much for always taking time. And I appreciate you simplifying the title commitment, the title policy, and the process. And I just really appreciate your time. Thank you also for watching my YouTube channel. Please stay tuned and we'll see what video comes up next.